Hello, cartoon fanatics, and welcome to a bit of change of pace. Today, we are going to be talking about the sixth and final season of the DreamWorks animated series based on How to Train Your Dragon. Arguably one of the best things that DreamWorks has ever created, next to Prince of Egypt, obviously, still standing as the best rendition of the story of Moses, and well, I guess Shrek, because who could ever top Shrek? Shrek is by far the best. Oh, it I've been told I can no longer, ironically, start talking about Shrek, or else this review's gonna descend into madness. So, my apologies for that. Let's get back on the track here. So, a little bit of history behind this. Basically, the How to Train Your Dragon cartoon series, it started as a series based after the events of the first movie and aired on Cartoon Network. I can't remember how many seasons that one had, but it shortly ended a little after the sequel, How to Train Your Dragon 2, came out. And basically the idea is it told the stories after the first one and before the second one. And then later, which no one was expecting, we got Race to the Edge, which was along the same lines. It was between the first and second How to Train Your Dragon movies, except this time it focused more closer to the age group that they were in How to Train Your Dragon 2, and it shows the events leading up to that to kind of supposedly tie in all the loose knots and extra story that's there, because there's a lot to explore with How to Train Your Dragon. It's a huge world with different dragons and different kinds of people, and it's pretty awesome. I'll give it that much. I've enjoyed both TV series. I'll admit when the first one came out all those years ago, I wasn't too pumped about it, and then the further along things got, and then of course when the sequel came out and we realized what was actually happening, it just kind of got better from there. But today we're just going to be talking about Race to the Edge, specifically the last season that came out on Netflix this past Friday. And they did announce it. It is officially the last. They even had tie-in connections on the last episode directly leading up to How to Train Your Dragon 2. So all of the empty spaces between the two movies, so to speak, have been filled up with these TV shows. So we're all caught up over the span of 5 years between the first two movies. Now, with all of that being said, let's talk about Season 6. And there was a lot of hype for Race to the Edge, mainly because it was on Netflix, and when a whole season came out, you could just watch it all at once, which, as I said, this past season just came out on Friday, and I'm recording this on Saturday morning, so that shows how quickly I got through all the episodes. All this time, the whole Race to the Edge series had been connecting old villains from the previous TV series of How to Train Your Dragon and introducing new ones, and kind of leading up to this point where it was expanding the world of How to Train Your Dragon for our main characters, so it made a little more sense how they're somewhat nonchalant about things that happen in How to Train Your Dragon 2, because there's all this new stuff like dragon hunters and the Bewilderbeast and the King of Dragons, and in the movie, I mean, don't get me wrong, you can still watch the movies without having to watch the TV series and be completely fine with what's going on. But in terms of character development, the TV series kind of helps give you an idea of, okay, they aren't completely shocked that this stuff is happening. They've heard about it before, which is kind of the big thing of the last season of Race to the Edge, is it's kind of tying all this up together. We've had this cast of villains that just has kept on building throughout the season. First, it was Dagger, the main antagonist from the first TV series. Then slowly he became a protagonist, and we got more antagonists like Vigo and his brother, who I can't even remember his name now. I think it was like Riker or something. And then we got more dragon riders, but not doing the same thing that Hiccup and his team do. Basically just all of this build-up, and it all leads back to the main antagonist in How to Train Your Dragon 2, Drago. Everything that's happening within Race to the Edge is all connected back to Drago and his quest to control an alpha of dragons. So that's pretty awesome to see all the build up there, especially since this came out after the sequel of How to Train Your Dragon. And we knew what was going to happen after this series. We knew. So it was just kind of like us as an audience knowing what's eventually going to happen, sitting back and watching these characters slowly get to the point of what will eventually happen to them. So it's quite a wild ride, and even though for a low budget, the animation, of course, is still really top-notch, it's obviously not the same budget as you have with a movie. I remember when the first TV series came out, I remember going, well, this looks nothing like the film. Well, you try making cutting-edge graphics with about a third of the budget that they used in the movie, younger me. Once you can figure out that, then you can go back in time and prove them wrong or whatever. But luckily, Race to the Edge didn't just provide more antagonists, they also gave us some pretty interesting allies for Hiccup and his crew. We've got the Defenders of the Wing, which the leader of that struck up this strange little romance with Dagger in this season that no one saw coming. I'm not quite sure if anyone ships it. It's just kind of a thing that happened, and we all stood back and looked at it and went, yeah, sure, why not? And then we have the other allies, which I actually find vastly more interesting, the Wing Maidens, which is a series of females that raise baby razor whip dragons, and the babies are so small that they cling to the backs of these girls, and they're actually flying through the sky, and they look like they have dragon wings from the front, and then from the back they're just baby razor whips on them. I like that. I thought that was pretty cool. So we learn about all these different traditions and customs outside of Berk, and it's really fascinating to see. What I wonder is, where do all of these allies come into play? Is this like something that they want to eventually bring in with the movies? And if so, because we know they're going to make a third How to Train Your Dragon, that there's no doubt about that. There will be a third one made. If the plan is to take all of these allies from the TV series and eventually sneak them into the film somehow, how is that going to work? I mean, I would really like to see the people from Defenders of the Wing and the people from the Wing Maidens get the high quality animation done to them, but at the same time, it might just be something they just kind of exist within the TV universe and stay there. It's kind of like with Dagger and Heather, Heather and Dagger, they were both in the old series, and none of them were brought up in How to Train Your Dragon 2, even though they were both characters introduced before How to Train Your Dragon 2 came out, so maybe that certain characters just, they'll never make it to the screen. Also, this season has a ton of foreshadowing for the second movie. It's kind of funny that they slipped all of that in. I think that was mostly for the fans to go, oh look, it's that thing, it's gonna be that thing. I hate to say it, the biggest kick that I got was when Stoic got really gravely injured near the last several episodes of the season. And Hiccup goes through this big struggle of, well, what if he never gets better and now I have to be the chief and I can't do that and this is all my fault. It never would have happened if I hadn't shot down Toothless. And we go through this series of very interesting events of, well, what would have happened if he hadn't shot down Toothless? At least we see it from Astrid's point of view, and her reasoning is that it wouldn't have mattered. They would have eventually come together anyway, and they would be right back where they are now, just a lot later in their lives. Which is kind of a sweet thing for her to say on her part, that, oh, it wouldn't have mattered if you had done it then or done it later. It was going to happen. You and Toothless were just destined to be together, which is kind of cute. But during all of that, I couldn't help. They acted, it was such a big thing, oh, is Stoic going to make it? And I was just in the back going, of course he's gonna make it. He doesn't die until later. You gotta save the death for the movie. That's where it counts. And they're going through all this talk of, oh, he'll be fine now, he'll save it. And I think there was one line where Hiccup was like, oh, I have to be there if he passes on. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, you'll be there all right. You'll witness it firsthand. Oh, I'm terrible. I'm really terrible. And then, of course, we actually got to see the growing relationship between Hiccup and Astrid, how they got to the point at the end of the first movie to where they are in the second movie, which we all know they obviously got a whole lot closer in the second movie. even though, they didn't show it, you could tell that stuff had happened within the course of those past 5 years. And in a way, we kind of get to see the development of them going from having a really tight-knit bond of friendship and really trusting each other to growing into something else and getting more romantically involved. Granted, it still felt very slow-paced, especially based on the way Astrid treated him at the end of the first movie, but, that things happen. You second guess yourself and all of that. But it was really nice to actually see that progression. I think that was something that the fandom, or at least the Hiccup and Astrid shippers, really wanted to see for a long period of time. So there you go. DreamWorks gave it to you on a silver platter. Boy, if only other companies would do that with their shows. If only other TV shows would give the shippers what they really want. Nah, it's too much fun watching them suffer. Finally leads us to the main plot of this season, which is, after discovering that Johann was a traitor, now it's a race to get all the Dragon Eye lenses to unlock the location of the King of Dragons. All of these lenses, all of these locations, all led to show you where the King of Dragons is, which, based on the second movie, we already know that that's the Bewilderbeast that Valka eventually gets into her possession. But we see the progression of that. We see what happens. There's this great battle, and ultimately the King of Dragons isn't even born yet. I think it's just an egg. So the Bewilderbeast protecting it was technically, I think, the mother of the King of Dragons, and then the actual King of Dragons was the egg, which only shows that the King of Dragons, when we see him in the second movie, is very young, which almost makes the death scene in that even more sad. But they never see the Bewilderbeast, so that leaves the shock and awe in the second movie still legit. But they are aware that there is a King of Dragons, and legend has it that he could mind control all of the other dragons, which shows why they aren't that surprised that it happens in the second movie. I mean, they're obviously not stoked about it, but it's not like a, what is happening? How is this possible? Moment in the movie. And the TV show kind of gives an explanation to their reactions in the film, which is nice. So we know that they're kind of aware of all of this stuff happening, just not completely. Of course, now with the events of the second movie directly happening after the end of the TV series, we see it all kind of come together in a nice little bow for now, which is nice. Until the third movie comes out. But honestly, we all want a third one. We all know it. We're hoping for it. When is it going to happen? Does anyone know? Please, I'm just sitting here waiting for something to happen. And that's all I gotta say about Race to the Edge, so there you go. If you liked this talk about How to Train Your Dragon, you can go ahead and put a thumbs up and press that like button. And don't forget to comment and subscribe as well, because we've got more exciting stuff coming up with Cartoon Corner. Star vs. the Forces of Evil. It's coming back in March. We're gonna be talking a lot about it when that happens. And maybe other cartoons will emerge then too. There will be a lot to talk about in March, so stay tuned, make it through the lull that is February right now.